Some cruise cabins seem perfect until you step inside and regret it instantly. From noisy spots to balconies you can't even use, I'm sharing 11 cabin types cruisers regret booking, and what to choose instead so your vacation isn't ruined before it begins. 1. Cabins right below the pool deck. If you've ever stayed directly beneath the pool deck, you probably know this is one of the noisiest ship areas. At first glance, the location seems convenient, close to the action, easy to pop up for a swim, and quick access to a lounge. However, the truth is that from early morning until late at night, crew members are dragging chairs across the deck, guests are stomping back and forth in flip-flops, and pool parties keep the music pumping. Deck maintenance, such as cleaning or moving loungers, produces a continuous scraping sound even during the quieter hours. I remember talking to someone who thought they booked their dream balcony only to get woken up at 6 a.m. by the clatter of pool furniture. It completely changed how they felt about their cruise. If you're a light sleeper or someone who values peace and quiet, this type of cabin might soon turn into a nightmare. Instead, you might want to reserve a cabin on the opposite end of the ship, or even one level down. You'll still have easy access to the pool, but without the constant background noise. To sum it up, cabins below the pool deck look good on the map, but almost always lead to regret when you're on board. 2. Cabins directly above or beside nightclubs and theaters. These cabins might look harmless on the deck plan, but they are frequently located over the ship's noisiest areas. Theaters, nightclubs, and lounges may wrap up long after midnight, and the bass from live shows or DJs travels right through the floors and walls. Even if you're a night owl, that thumping sound does not disappear when you finally want to sleep. One cruiser told me their stateroom was right above the theater and they enjoyed the show every night whether they wanted to or not. Throughout the day, it was impossible to unwind due to the loudness from musical performances, clapping, or even the rehearsals. It's easy to get caught out because deck maps don't label exactly where the theater ceiling ends or how far the nightclub stretches. Cabins that appear to be a few doors distance can occasionally still feel the vibrations. I would advise that before booking, always double-check the decks above and below the stateroom you've selected. Avoid nightclubs and entertainment areas if you see them. The quietest cabins are usually those that are sandwiched between two passenger decks. Trust me, you don't want your bedtime soundtrack to be a DJ's remix. 3. Obstructed view balconies. An obstructed view balcony sounds like a great deal. The price is usually lower than a standard balcony and you think, hey, at least I still get fresh air. Problem is that the obstruction can be much larger than you expect. Lifeboats, machinery, or steel beams may block the very view you paid extra for. I've seen passengers step into their cabin expecting endless ocean views only to discover that the entire frame is taken up by a bright orange lifeboat. Some obstacles are minor, like a railing or piece of equipment, but others make it difficult to see the water at all. Worst part is that photos online rarely show that exact obstruction. Cruise lines often use generic images, so you don't know till you get on board, and at that point it's too late to change. One general rule that I apply is to make sure that the balcony you're paying for is actually a balcony. Don't settle for obstructed views unless the price savings are significant and you genuinely don't care about scenery. Sometimes a bigger window with an ocean view is a better choice if you still want fresh air. A balcony is meant to be your personal escape, not a reminder that you're staring at lifeboats for 7 nights straight. 4. Guarantee cabins. Guarantee cabins are tempting because they come at a lower cost. You don't pick the exact location. Cruise line assigns you one, sometimes even upgrading you. Catch is, you usually don't end up with whatever's left over, and those cabins are there for a reason. I've spoke with cruisers who book a guarantee and were placed in cabins right above the anchor, beside noisy service doors or at the very front where the ship rocks the most. Yes, occasionally a cruiser gets lucky with an upgrade, but it's the exception rather than the rule. Now, if you're flexible and genuinely don't care where your cabin is, a guarantee can save you money. However, it's wiser to pay a little more to select your specific stateroom if location's important, like if you're prone to motion sickness or value silence. Would you book a hotel room without knowing it was beside the elevator, over the kitchen, or in the basement? Most likely not, and cruises aren't no exception. So unless you're okay with rolling the dice, guarantees often lead to disappointment. 5. Cabins near the elevators or stairwells. At first, being close to the elevator sounds super convenient. You're close to the activity and only need to go a short distance. However, there's also a lot of foot traffic in these cabins. Imagine kids racing down the hallway, late-night laughter, and the recognizable ding that the elevator makes every time it arrives. Although the location was convenient, the noise continued when I stayed a few doors away from the elevator. Even in the early morning, people gathered while waiting for lifts. It felt like the hallway outside was a 24-hour meeting point. Even worse are stairwells. You may hear the doors opening and closing all the time because crew members frequently utilize them to move carts or equipment. If mobility is a concern, being near an elevator might be worth the trade-off. However, choosing a cabin a little further down the hall is preferable for most individuals. Even 10 or 15 doors away makes a huge difference in peace and quiet. So while the elevator cabins may seem appealing on the deck plan, many cruisers end up regretting their decision as reality sets in. 6. Forward cabins, low decks. They may be less expensive, and if you've never gone cruising before, you might think it doesn't really matter where I am. However, forward cabins are infamous for their loudness and movement. Because they're at the very front of the ship, you'll feel the rise and fall of waves much more strongly. This can easily ruin a vacation for anyone who's prone to motion sickness. I've heard stories of people who spent entire sea days in bed because their forward cabin felt like a roller coaster ride. And then there's sound. Low-deck forward cabins are frequently located close to the anchor. Even the most restless sleeper would be awakened by the sound of the anchor chain being lowered when the ship docks early in the morning. The alternative is midship cabins. On a middle deck, they are typically the most balanced and stable. Yes, they may be a little more expensive, but the added comfort makes a difference. Unless you're a deep sleeper with an iron stomach, forward cabins are one of the choices you'll regret almost immediately. 7. Aft cabins above engines or thrusters. Aft cabins have a loyal fan base because of the beautiful wake views, but not all aft cabins are created equal. If your stateroom is positioned directly above the engines or near thrusters, you'll experience a constant low rumble and vibration. Some cruisers actually find the sound soothing, like white noise, but for many it's distracting, and combined with vibration, it can feel like your bed is shaking. Add to that the possibility of strong exhaust smells in certain weather, and suddenly the romantic aft view doesn't feel so dreamy. One couple told me they had chosen an aft cabin thinking it would be peaceful. Instead, they described it as sleeping on top of a washing machine. Others have mentioned drawers rattling and glasses clinking from the subtle but constant vibration. It's the kind of annoyance you don't anticipate until you're actually there. If you love the idea of an aft view, do your research carefully. Higher decks tend to be quieter, and cabins further from mechanical spaces are usually fine. Some ships even have specially designed aft balconies with better sound insulation, which can make a big difference, but just don't pick any aft cabin and assume it's going to be perfect. Aft cabins can be wonderful, but if you get the wrong one, it can be one of the most regrettable choices on board. 8. Connecting cabins when you don't need one. Connecting cabins sound convenient for families and groups, and they are when you actually use them. The problem is when you don't need that connecting door. Why? Because the doors between the cabins are thin and they don't block sound nearly as well as walls do. That means you're going to hear conversations, TVs, and even snoring from your neighbors much more clearly. Privacy goes out the window. I once heard a cruiser joke that staying in a connecting cabin was sort of like being part of someone else's vacation, whether they wanted to or not. Cruise lines don't always warn you when your cabin is a connecting one, so it's important to double-check before booking. If you're traveling as a couple or solo and you don't need the connection, avoid it altogether. If you do need adjoining rooms, connecting cabins can be fantastic, but if not, they're one of the most common sources of regret. For peace and quiet, always opt for a non-connecting stateroom when possible. 9. Cabins right below the gym or sports deck. Imagine drifting off to sleep, only to be jolted awake by the sound of dumbbells hitting the floor or treadmills pounding overhead. That's the reality of cabins under gyms or sports courts. The noise usually begins in the morning because of early risers who are going to the exercise center. I once heard from a passenger who stayed beneath the basketball court. They said it felt like someone was dribbling directly over their head all day long, and because gyms have hard flooring, the sound carries even more. While it's great to be near the fitness center if you're an exercise enthusiast, it's better to choose a cabin nearby rather than directly underneath. A short walk down the hall is a small price to pay for a full night's sleep. So, unless you love the sound of dumbbells and running feet as your alarm clock, steer clear of these cabins. 10. Inside cabins without natural light. Inside cabins are the most budget-friendly option on a cruise, and for some people they're just fine, but one of the biggest complaints is the lack of natural light. With no windows, it's easy to lose track of time. You might wake up at noon thinking it's still the middle of the night. Some people love the darkness for sleeping, but many find it disorienting. It can feel claustrophobic, especially on longer sailings. I've heard first-time cruisers say they thought they'd be okay inside a cabin, but after a few days, they felt trapped and regretted not spending more for a window or balcony. If you're trying to save money, inside cabins can work, but here's a tip. Some cruise lines, they offer virtual balconies with screens showing live ocean views. Now, it's not the same as real sunlight, but it does help. Another workaround is bringing a sunrise alarm clock, which mimics daylight and makes mornings feel more natural. Still, if you know you value natural light, even an ocean view cabin with a porthole can make a huge difference in how comfy your cruise feels. On longer itineraries, especially, that little bit of daylight can make your entire cabin experience feel less confining and more enjoyable overall. 11. Promenade or public deck cabins. These cabins are located along areas like the promenade where people can walk right past your window. On the deck plan, they seem like a cool central location. You might even get a large window, but here's the catch. To have any privacy, you'll have to keep your curtains closed almost the whole time. That means you lose natural light and any view you thought you'd enjoy. And if you forget to close those curtains, let's just say a passerby might catch a glimpse of something you didn't want to share. In addition to the privacy concern, the foot flow outside makes these cabins frequently noisier. Evening entertainment, parades, or just people passing by can keep you up past your bedtime. The other option is to stick with traditional ocean view or balcony cabins. They might cost more, but you'll actually be able to enjoy the view without worrying about who's watching from the other side of the glass. For most people, promenade cabins end up being more hassle than they're worth. And there you have it, 11 cruise ship cabins many travelers regret booking. Have you ever stayed in one of these? Share your experience in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more cruise fun. Until next time, smooth seas and happy cruising.